Welcome to the deep dive. Ever stumble upon a law that just makes you scratch your head?
Oh, definitely.
We're talking about regulations so odd, they almost sound like jokes, like a fine for chewing gum, or rules about what you can name your pig, even a decree about smiling.
Right. It's a truly fascinating and, yeah, sometimes unbelievable world of urban legislation.
And that's exactly what we're diving into today.
Exactly. This deep dive, it's like we're taking a global trip into some of the most, well, peculiar city laws ever put on the books. We've looked through quite a range of sources to figure out not just what they are, but why.
Yeah, the why is key.
Our goal is to kind of get past that initial wait, what reaction and really understand what these strange rules tell us about the societies that came up with them.
Our mission today isn't just, a tour of the bazaar, though let's be honest, we've got some real head scratchers lined up.
We certainly do.
We want to explore the history behind them, the cultural context, and the actual impact these laws have, or sometimes the complete lack of impact, right?
It too, yeah.
Think of it as unlocking a city's personality, maybe, through its most unusual rules. These aren't just random quirks. They really offer a window into a city's priorities, its past, maybe even its sense of humor.
And we've pulled together a pretty compelling set of examples for this. Today, we're going to dig into 8 specific laws that really stood out to us.
That's right. We're going to look into Singapore's famous ban on chewing gum,
The classic.
the historical and mostly forgotten mandate to smile in Milan, those restrictions on feeding pigeons in Venice,
Oh, the pigeons.
and that interesting requirement in Turin for dog owners about daily walks.
And we'll also touch on the weird situation with Winnie the Pooh t-shirts in a Polish town.
That was something else.
The very old French rule about naming pigs, the surprisingly practical law in Anchorage about not waking up sleeping bears.
Sensible, maybe.
And finally, yeah, those unique guidelines for eating fried chicken down in Gainesville, Georgia.
Quite the list. So for each one, we're going to explore why it was created, how it's enforced or not today, and what it actually means for the people living there. So whether you travel a lot or you're just curious about the world, get ready for a deep dive into the, well, unbelievable laws shaping our cities. Okay, let's kick things off with Singapore. Known for being so orderly, what's the real deal with the chewing gum ban?
Well, yeah, the ban on chewing gum in public in Singapore, it's definitely a strict one. You're looking at pretty hefty fines, potentially even jail time if you import or sell it without permission.
Wow, jail time.
Yeah, there are some exceptions, like for therapeutic gums, but otherwise, nope, banned in public spaces.
It's so well known it almost feels like urban legend. But what really pushed them to do something so drastic, I mean, for gum?
Right, it seems minor, but the ban, which came in '92, was mostly about public cleanliness. Singapore really values a clean environment, and discarding gum was a big nuisance, sticking to sidewalks, getting into building mechanisms. But the real kicker was the mass rapid transit system, the MRT.
Ah, the trains.
Yeah, gum stuck in the train doors was apparently causing massive problems. Delays, repairs, the figure quoted was around SGD 150,000 a year.
Okay, that's serious money.
Exactly. So, given Singapore's focus on efficiency and, well, order, a full ban seemed like the most effective way to tackle it. There was that slight relaxation in 2004, I think, due to a U.S. trade agreement allowing medicinal gum.
That puts it in a different light, not just about looking tidy, but real economic and logistical issues. So how's it enforced now? Are there signs everywhere?
You don't always see, like, blatant enforcement or tons of signs, but the threat of the fine is a powerful deterrent. Tourists especially can get caught out. Fines can be like SGD 500 to 1,000.
Ouch.
Yeah. And the fact that you hear these stories, maybe just travel blogs, about sort of black market for gum, it shows how strong the ban is. It really highlights that trade-off Singapore makes. Super high public cleanliness, but achieved through pretty strict rules on what people can do. For visitors, it's definitely a culture shock sometimes.
It really does raise that question, doesn't it? How societies balance, individual freedom versus the collective good. Singapore seems firmly on one side there. Did our sources say anything about how Singaporeans themselves feel about it? Is everyone on board?
Well, generally, given Singapore's culture, there seems to be a high level of acceptance. But some sources hint that maybe younger generations see it as a bit outdated, but you can't really argue with how clean the place is, so it's effective. It's just a fascinating case of how a seemingly small thing leads to this major law with real cultural ripples.
Okay, let's switch gears. Let's head over to Milan, Italy. City of fashion, sophistication, and apparently enforced smiling. What's that about?
Yeah, it's pretty wild. Milan has this very old regulation, goes way back to the Austro-Hungarian Empire days, and it basically said citizens had to smile all the time
Yeah.
in public. Seriously. The only exceptions were like funerals or if you were visiting a hospital.
The smile mandate. That sounds exhausting. Less like law, more like, I don't know, performance art. Why? What was the thinking?
Well, the idea seems to be tied to projecting this image of Milan as a prosperous, welcoming city. It was a major trade hub, remember?
Right.
So it reflects that historical focus on sort of public presentation, public decorum. And the funny thing is, it's apparently never been officially repealed.
Still on the books.
Technically, yeah. Though obviously zero enforcement today. One historian, Andrea Santangelo, suggested it was about boosting civic pride, like visuals showing how happy and successful the city was supposed to be.
So more about appearances than feelings.
Yeah.
It's incredible how different times had such different ideas about, well, governing. Did the sources say if it was ever actually, like, enforced back in the day?
History suggests probably not much, even then. I mean, can you imagine trying to police smiles across a whole city? Right. So today, it's just this historical curiosity. Adds a bit of quirky charm to Milan's past, but totally irrelevant now. Makes you wonder how many other forgotten laws are technically still lurking out there.
It is funny to think about. Imagine getting a ticket from some 19th century cop for looking a bit down. Just picture trying to follow that rule today.
Yeah.
What would that even be like?
Oh, the effort, just maintaining a constant, genuine-looking smile, it would be draining. Our faces naturally show what you're feeling, right?
Yeah.
Trying to suppress that all day would be tiring and feel incredibly fake. The fact they even needed exemptions for funerals and hospitals just shows how absurd it is to try and legislate facial expressions. It really highlights how it's social norms, not laws, that usually dictate how we act in public.
So a law about smiling ends up having zero impact today, but it gives us this little glimpse into past attitudes about public image. Okay, let's move on. Venice, another Italian city, but battling a different kind of public nuisance. Pigeons. Why the ban on feeding them in St. Mark's Square?
Yes. The pigeon feeding ban in St. Mark's Square, that came in around 2008, and it was really born out of necessity. The pigeon population had just exploded.
Because tourists kept feeding them.
Exactly. What seems like a charming photo op for visitors became a massive headache for Venice. The sheer number of birds caused huge damage to the historic buildings. Droppings are corrosive, you know?
Right.
And the cleanup costs were enormous. I saw figures suggesting it cost hundreds of euros per citizen each year. Some locals were even calling them rats of the sky.
Oof. Rats of the sky.
Yeah. So the ban really reflects Venice's struggle balancing that huge tourist influx with preserving its incredible heritage.
It's that classic problem, isn't it? Good intentions, maybe, from the tourists, but the overall effect is damaging. How do they even enforce that? St. Mark's Square is always packed.
It's visible. You'll see officials patrolling, and they do seem to target tourists who are openly feeding the birds. Fines are possible, like 50 to 200 euro. Locals mostly support it, obviously, because they deal with the fallout.
Makes sense.
But you still sometimes see vendors nearby selling bird seed, which suggests enforcement isn't, totally airtight. It's probably helped reduce the numbers, but it's an ongoing battle in a city drowning in tourism.
Sounds like a constant tightrope walk. Imagine being a tourist, buying some seed, thinking you're having this iconic Venice moment, and bam, a fine.
Right. It really drives home that need to respect local rules, even if they seem a bit odd at first glance.
So what does this ban tell us about Venice's priorities now?
Well, it clearly shows a shift towards protecting their historical and architectural assets over, say, allowing that kind of free-for-all interaction with wildlife in public squares. It reflects that growing awareness of the costs, environmental, structural, of mass tourism, and the need for rules to manage it.
Okay, so a ban driven by the need to protect a fragile historic place. Let's hop over to Turin, also Italy. Here, the focus shifts to a different city resident. Dogs. What's this law about mandatory walks?
Right. In Turin, if you own a dog, you're legally required to walk it at least once a day. And if you don't, you could face fines up to 500 euro. And the same law, interestingly, also bans dyeing a dog's fur weird colors.
A mandatory dog walk. It's quite specific for animal welfare. What's the thinking behind that?
Well, Turin actually has some of the strictest animal protection laws in Italy. It seems to reflect a really strong cultural value placed on pets and their well-being.
Okay.
This specific law, from the 2000s sometime, is really aimed at making sure dogs get enough exercise and, socialization. Tackling neglect, especially for dogs living in apartments. It's part of this bigger push in Turin for responsible, humane pet ownership.
It's definitely proactive. But how on earth do you monitor something like that? Do they have, like, dog walking police?
Left slightly. Not exactly. Enforcement seems to rely more on community reporting. Neighbors noticing a dog that never seems to go out.
Ah, okay.
Fines might be rare, but there's a strong social pressure in Turin to look after your pets properly. Visitors with dogs need to know about it too, though a short trip probably isn't going to get you fined. It really just shows a society actively legislating for animal needs.
It does make you think about our own responsibilities as pet owners, doesn't it? Even without a law, we kind of know dogs need walks. Turin just made it official. Does it seem to have a noticeable effect on the city's pet culture?
Oh, absolutely, I think so. It reinforces that idea of dogs as companions with needs, not just property. It probably leads to a more active, maybe more social dog population, and it strengthens that community feel among pet owners in Turin. It definitely sets a high standard for animal welfare in cities.
Interesting. Okay, let's travel now to Poland and a really unique situation involving Winnie the Pooh. What was the deal with his T-shirt in Tussin?
This one is genuinely bizarre. So in this town, Tucson, in Poland, there was a local council decision, an ordinance basically, that effectively banned Winnie the Pooh t-shirts, specifically on playgrounds.
Ban Pooh Bear. Why?
The reasoning given by some officials was, well, his lack of pants.
His lack of pants.
And his, quote, unclear gender. They felt this combination was somehow inappropriate for young children. This was around 2014, and apparently there are even potential fines mentioned.
That is remarkable. It sounds like something from, I don't know, The Onion. How did this come about? What was the cultural context?
It seems to stem from some pretty conservative local values in Tussin. The officials involved voiced concerns that Pooh's attire, or lack thereof, and ambiguity could confuse or maybe even corrupt kids. It taps into those broader debates about media influence on children. Of course, it sparked a lot of international ridicule.
I can only imagine. So how is this actually enforced? Were playground patrols checking T-shirts?
From what we gathered, enforcement was pretty sporadic, more about making a statement, it seems. Actual fines were probably rare, but the threat of, public disapproval or embarrassment might have had some effect locally.
Right.
But it was very much a Tussin thing. Pooh t-shirts were presumably fine everywhere else in Poland. It's just a stark example of how different cultural norms can be, how something totally innocuous in one place can be seen as problematic in another.
It really makes you think about the lens we apply to kids' media. A simple cartoon bear becomes this point of cultural friction. What was the wider impact of this unusual stance?
Well, practically, probably not much impact on daily life there, but it definitely brought Tuzin a lot of unwanted global attention and, frankly, mockery.
Yeah.
It sort of became a symbol of perceived conservatism clashing with mainstream views. It's a good reminder that even tiny local rules can blow up globally in the internet age. Okay, let's shift over to France now. Deep history there. And a law about naming pigs. What's the Napoleon rule? Yes, France. I have this old law, goes all the way back to 1894, making it illegal to name a pig Napoleon.
Still legal.
Well, the criminal penalties got relaxed in 2013, but technically you could still face civil fines if you name a pig in a way that's seen as offending a head of state.
That's a very specific, long-held grudge. What was the logic? Protecting Napoleon's honor from pigs.
Pretty much. It was enacted during the Third Republic, which was apparently a politically sensitive time regarding the whole Napoleonic legacy. Naming a pig an animal sometimes seen negatively after the Napoleon was viewed as deliberate disrespect, mockery.
Okay.
It really speaks to France's deep connection with its history and maybe a certain sensitivity about protecting the image of its national heroes.
So, upholding historical dignity. Fast forward over a century. Is this still a thing? Are there, undercover pig-naming inspectors?
Slight chuckle. Definitely not. Enforcement is zero today. It's incredibly unlikely anyone's been fined for this in living memory. Farmers, pet owners, they just ignore it.
Right.
It exists now as this quirky historical footnote, really, a testament to the political feelings of a completely different era. Just shows how laws can stick around long after the reason for them disappears.
It's almost funny to think about the legal drama over naming Wilbur Napoleon today. It really highlights how much societies and politics change, leaving these weird legal fossils behind. Okay, let's head way north now. Anchorage, Alaska. Laws reflecting coexistence with wildlife. What's this rule about waking sleeping bears?
Right. In Anchorage, Alaska, it is actually illegal to wake a sleeping bear.
Okay.
And this one is purely practical. It's about safety for people and for the bears. Disturbing a resting or hibernating bear, well, that can lead to very unpredictable, potentially dangerous
It
reactions.
makes total sense, especially in Alaska where people and bears share the same space. Less historical baggage, more basic safety protocol. What's the background? Was there a specific incident?
Probably not one specific incident, but just the reality of Alaska's environment. Human-bear encounters happen. This law, likely from the mid-20th century, seems aimed at stopping reckless behavior like people trying to poke a hibernating bear for a photo or something stupid like that. Yeah, so it protects the bears from stress, especially when they're vulnerable, and it protects humans from potentially getting attacked. It's all about respecting the wildlife and the inherent dangers. The wording might sound a bit quirky, waking a sleeping bear, but the intent is serious.
Sounds like pure common sense for anyone in bear country. How's it enforced? Are there signs saying, shh, bear napping?
Chuckles. Maybe not exactly like that, but there's a lot of education. Direct enforcement is probably rare, mostly in remote areas maybe. Park rangers, wildlife officials, they focus on teaching people bear safety.
Right.
But you could face fines, maybe even jail time, if you deliberately and recklessly woke a bear, especially if it caused a dangerous situation. It really reinforces that idea when they're
Right.
in their house.
It's interesting how these urban laws, or maybe state laws in this case, extend right into the wild.
Yeah.
Reflects the specific challenges of that environment. A good reminder, laws aren't just about people interacting with people. Okay, final stop. Gainesville, Georgia. This one sounds more like fun than law. The fried chicken rule.
That's right. Gainesville, Georgia, calls itself the poultry capital of the world. And they have this wonderfully quirky local ordinance that says you must eat fried chicken with your hands.
Must, like utensils are forbidden.
Technically, yes. Using a fork and knife for fried chicken is against the rules. And apparently, back in the day, they even staged these mock arrests of people caught using utensils just for laughs.
That sounds more like a town embracing its identity than serious lawmaking. What's the origin story there?
It reportedly dates back to the 1960s. It was just this playful way to celebrate Gainesville's huge role in the poultry industry. The enforcement is completely theatrical. It's a publicity stunt, a point of local pride. All about that authentic, hands-on, maybe messy fried chicken experience.
So if a tourist instinctively reaches for a fork, no actual trouble. It's more like a beloved local joke.
Exactly that. Residents love it, local restaurants play along, tourists usually find it charming and happily ditch the silverware for photos. It's actually brilliant marketing for Gainesville, tying them directly to their poultry heritage in this fun, memorable way.
It's a fantastic example of how laws, or maybe pseudo-laws, can actually build community spirit and celebrate culture instead of just restricting things. Sounds like a tradition you'd want to join in on.
Absolutely. That Gainesville fried chicken roll. It's a perfect example of how a seemingly silly regulation can turn into this cherished local thing, even a form of cultural branding.
Well, what an incredible journey through the weird, wonderful, and sometimes wacky world of city laws. From serious bans driven by economics to lighthearted traditions celebrating local industry.
Yeah, it's clear these rules offer this fascinating peek into what different places value, their history, their quirks.
Definitely. As we've seen, even the laws that seem completely bizarre on the surface often have some kind of root, historical, cultural, practical. Digging into them gives you a much deeper understanding of how societies work and the different ways they try to shape how people behave.
It really does.
It certainly gives you a new perspective on the rules governing our own lives, even the ones that seem perfectly normal, or maybe slightly odd. So for you listening, which of these laws was the most surprising to you? Or maybe you know of another strange regulation from your own city or travels. Something to think about.
Yeah, we really encourage you to keep looking into this stuff. The world of urban legislation is full of these hidden stories and insights into how our cities and the people in them